What are your thoughts on this theory that you need to have essentially a traumatic catalyst in order for us to start printing again, in order for everything to go back up?
Yeah, I don't know if you have to have that traumatic catalyst. I think there is like a world where rates go down, liquidity conditions improve, even though the economy kind of like, if the economy is really hot, then that's off the table. But if the economy is like just good, and then rates kind of like can be lower as they watch the unemployment and that kind of stuff, like that's actually a really good backdrop for risk assets, crypto included. So that'd be good. And in the case of like Ethereum, like it's interesting, right? Last month, Solana was up 20%. So like if you look at this NASDAQ crypto index, it was up 10. Usually, if it beats Bitcoin, it's because Ethereum beat Bitcoin. Ethereum was down, but like it's Ethereum's like share of that market is slowly shrinking as everything else goes up, and then you get a big win out of something like a Solana that's up 20, and then it can help things like and Ripple obviously can help push this Nasdaq crypto index higher, even though the second largest constituent by a long shot is like down on the month. It's like, whoa, that's crazy. Like that's not usually how it works. There's a book by Andrew Chen called The Cold Start Problem that talks a lot about network effects. He's got some blog posts you can read on it too. But the idea is this, right? Like, networks have exponential value, or a value that grows like, proportionally, or like, exponentially, like, as like the number of users increase, right? Like one telephone is not very helpful. Two telephones is kind of cool. Three telephones is even better because like, and then as you get to like more and more users of a telephone, like Metcalfe's law says that this is like a much more valuable thing because more people makes for like more potential like communicative nodes or whatever else, right? Now, as more people use crypto, like Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is like, its whole thing is that like people believe in it. More people own it, the more valuable it gets. And it kind of like has this like self-reinforcing cycle, even though it's outside of it being like a non-sovereign store of value, which has value because people believe it to be. So there's a kind of like a circular argument there. But outside of that, it doesn't really do much. You know what I mean? Like it could be collateral and stuff like that, but it's not like, it's a little bit like gold, right? But because people believe in it and that number of people grows up, it's super valuable. In the case of it, but that goes both ways. So like, other networks and the internet that we've seen, like MySpaces, these various networks that like have huge value. And then as people start to leave them, they have this like, as the hockey chart goes up, it goes down like at that same kind of rate as well as people start to leave the ecosystem. And so I think this is an interesting lens from which to like look at Ethereum right now, where it's got this kind of issue where there's fighting, at different levels, or like, infighting sort of, or like, different peoples in the community are not like, it's not like fun vibes like it typically is relative to some of the other vibes. Like, in the past, like Bitcoin had this one vibe and Ethereum had a different vibe, and that was cool. And now that's changed. And so that's not a great place to start. And then, relatively speaking, for smaller users and stuff like that, unless you're already on an L2 and that's where you start, it's not super fun to have to bridge over and all that other kind of stuff. Again, there are things that are getting done to fix that, but like in the short term, like, if you were going to onboard someone to crypto, you'd probably use Solana, right? Like, because that's the easiest way for them to like, here's $30, go and try different things, right? You just can't really do that in Ethereum world, on the L1 anyways. And then if you want to do that in L2, it's like, okay, well, here, let me get you some, some wrapped or some ETH over to bridge it over to base or something like that, right? So it's got some issues on that. And so what Andrew Chen says on these network effects is that just because ETH has network effects doesn't make it a moat in and of itself, right? Like it can have moat-like benefits, but anything else, any other blockchain network has network effects too, and it can steal those network effects from other networks. So if Ethereum's huge and it's got this big network, that's awesome. And then people see things that are cool over in Solana, and it's like, oh, it's similar to that one, but it's better. Like we've seen with like MySpaces and other kind of like different networks in the past. Oh, we go over here. And then what ends up happening is it's like a death spiral in the one ecosystem and a new renaissance on another. I'm not saying that's happening, but it's like it's a legit risk. Now, and then on top of that, when you have this like product death cycle, where then what ends up happening is that the ecosystem that starts to like, hemorrhage users and see its value fall as a result of that, is like, oh shoot, we got to like start shipping products just as fast as we can. And then you just start like, putting product out that's like, maybe half baked or not working quite as well than whatever else. And then it makes for a even less desirable user experience, which is ironic because that's what it's trying to fix. And then it just capitulates this whole thing. So all that to say, it's not a short book, but the Cold Start Problem is an awesome one to read, especially if you're in crypto. And Andrew Chen does have a number of essays to this effect, and it's a really interesting kind of lens from which to look at the situation in Ethereum right now, right? Where like, just looking at the different charts here, like Bitcoin versus Ethereum. Ethereum's price not that bad, especially if you like back it up over a longer period, but like it's not doing the greatest versus like Bitcoin's doing much better and Solana's doing much better. So it just kind of that's kind of that reflexivity in crypto where like, oh, prices are going up. Interesting. So the bag of gas that I have is going up as I do things on chain. Okay, that's interesting. It's a bit more fun, for the newbies coming in versus coming into Ethereum right now. It's like if you were new and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to follow some crypto Twitter in Ethereum. You go on there, you see people infighting. It's like that, you know what I mean? It's just not. It's a problem. It's just flat out. So.